And blessed to be a part of your day. Let's go out to Dallas, Texas here at KIDO Talk Radio. Liberty McWhorter joining us from thestream.org to talk about Good Friday and to put Holy Week in perspective. Liberty, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks so much for having me.
You know, we take a look at the lead story on Fox News. No, it wasn't the Russians getting kicked out. It was the comments allegedly made by Pope Francis, and then you have the Vatican denying them. Of course, it makes for great clickbait, but your thoughts on this story that is topping the charts worldwide?
Well, I mean, I think it's easy, again, as I write in the article, to get caught up in everything that's going on around us. And, you know, there's definitely regarding the comments by the Pope. I know there's a lot of people that are confused about that and trying to figure out, you know, what exactly happened, where the Vatican stands. And then, you know, there's so much going on in our nation with people debating on either side about, you know, who's the most corrupt in government, and it can be really easy to get caught up on one side or another. But I really think it would be good, especially this weekend, for people, especially Christians in the United States, to take a step back and realize that, you know, maybe focusing on the top news all the time is not the most healthy approach, and it can really make us lose perspective on things.
Well, imagine that. People would take a break from the news to celebrate what Christ did for us. I would hope that there is hope in the world, but, you know, we talk about the secularization of our society that we live in today, and I don't think there's a bigger example than the golden calf than social media.
It's, I mean, very true. And there are a lot of stories coming out in the, you know, past couple of years showing how people are actually addicted to social media and to their phones and to the internet. And so it's not just a pastime anymore. People really are getting sucked in, and they are studying the brain and realizing that, you know, people sometimes get the same chemical reaction in their brain from using their phone and social media a lot that they do from using other substances. So that's something to be aware of too. If you're on social media all the time, it's not only, you know, not healthy because you're focused on a little screen and not on the real world around you, but it can actually be an addiction that pulls you away from real life and, again, contributes to, you know, mental health issues, a lack of perspective on what truly matters. And so that's just something we need to be aware of.
Well, how does that relate to our spiritual lives?
Well, the thing I write about this week is that, you know, when we are addicted to social media, you know, whether it's Facebook or Twitter these days, that's how a lot of people get their news. And, you know, in the past, it was just like, oh, you know, my friend is eating a salad for lunch on Facebook. But now, no matter what social media, you know, platform you use, it's so much bad news. A headline here, you know, there's another crisis, it's another Trump scandal, or this thing is under investigation, or, you know, the Pope said this, and, you know, what's happening to our culture and our society. And it can be really easy to just focus on that and think, wow, you know, what is happening to our world, and, you know, get really depressed about that. But one thing I saw recently, it was actually a story a few months ago, but somebody retweeted it, so I was reminded of it. Back in November, there was a new poll that said most Americans say this is the lowest point in U.S. history. And I just, you know, that obviously there are a lot of bad things going on in our society right now, but that kind of baffled me just because there have been so many dark periods in our nation's history, from slavery to the world wars to the Great Depressions, where, you know, things, I would argue, looked a lot worse for a lot of people than they do today. And so I think when you have over half of the nation saying that this right now is the worst point in our nation's history because of Trump or whatever, that really shows a lack of perspective. And so we can look at our own nation's history, and then for Christians during Holy Week, we can look at world history and look at, you know, what the disciples of Jesus were going through 2,000 years ago on this weekend, and how bleak things looked for them when they thought, you know, the Savior, the Messiah that had come to set them free was suddenly killed. And that reminds us that, you know, there is always a time that looks really bleak, and we wonder if things will ever get better. But we know the end of the story, that things do get better, and so that's why we have to keep the perspective.
Liberty McWhorter joining us from thestream.org. Kevin Miller here on Good Friday at KIDO Talk Radio. But now let's get back to, the non-Christian. The folks that, Easter is just a, spring break, or, the Easter Bunny, nothing against the Easter Bunny, that sort of thing. We trivialize that. How can they return to Christ and find God in their lives?
Well, I think that's one of the reasons it is so important for Christians to keep a perspective, and not get so caught up in the culture wars that we lose sight of what truly matters, which is sharing Christ with people. And we do that through living that out through our lives. So if Christians are going around hopeless, and without any hope or despairing about the world around us, what message does that send to non-believers? So in our lives, Christians, we really have to exemplify the hope that we have that, Christ is going to return and he is defeating evil. He has defeated evil. And even now, just looking back, at, horrible times in history and how Christians have, usually been a leading force in, whether it was the abolition movement or, anything else in history, that, we can improve things even now, before Christ's return. So I think, when the world around, they see Easter as just an Easter Bunny holiday to get candy or whatever, and they see the world, crumbling around us, it seems, that they might have despair and think, wow, this is the worst time in history. But if they look to Christians and say, wow, they really have hope, they really have optimism about the future, and they're not getting weighed down by all the bad things going on around us, then, that will pique their curiosity, and then we can answer their questions, and we can say, here's why I have that hope, and here's why you can have that hope too.
Liberty, final question. Let's get back to the Pope's comments. I guess all religions can say this, but there, when it comes to the Catholic Church, there seems to be an anti-Catholic bias, in the way, the Pope is reported on, or am I just being overly sensitive?
No, I think that's definitely true. And it's always hard, whenever there's a report, obviously we value journalism as journalists, but it's kind of like gossip. So somebody can say one thing and it can get taken out of context. And you're right, there are so many people with an anti-Catholic or an anti-Christian and general bias that they want to pounce on that. And so I think that's important too. The main thing is you have to, keep in mind what you believe is true and know that, that's, what Scripture teaches and everything is the ultimate measure of truth. But again, take everything in the media with a grain of salt because if you're not there, you don't really know exactly what was said, and there are a lot of people who are going to do everything they can and pounce at every opportunity to try to criticize the church or take it down. So you have to take things with a grain of salt and realize maybe some things are getting misreported.
Indeed, of course, it makes for great copy across the country, and again, people that don't view religion as seriously as others, it's easy for them to be flippant about these comments or these alleged comments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true. It is, it is something important, but again, we have to take everything with a grain of salt, and we have to just keep that perspective, that eternal perspective, and also realize that you can't always trust everything you read in the media, and so you really want to listen to other Christian voices and Christian journalists that are reporting on these things, and take both sides of the issue and say, what are both sides saying, and rather than trying to jump to a quick conclusion that makes for a good headline, really dig into the truth. And I think in our fast-paced 24/7 news cycle, it's really hard for people to really take time to search for the truth. You see a grabby headline and you want an answer that day or that hour, and that's just not how things work. So it takes patience, and it takes really digging in to try to find out what happened a lot of the times.
Well, Liberty, we appreciate it. We always catch your work in the stream, and you have a blessed day.
All right. Thanks.
All right. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller in the morning here. Before we get rolling, obviously, a lot of people are talking about these comments you heard at the top of the hour from Fox News. Remember, when you hear Fox News on the radio, you're listening to KIDO Talk Radio, and coming up, we'll get your thoughts, your comments concerning Good Friday and this atheist that took a shot at Francis. Of course, many people in and outside the Catholic Church, where the Pope is the head of, are not down with the Pope. They think he's too liberal. So we'll get a little thought on that. Also, if you'd like to share your thoughts on what Good Friday means to you and whether or not people should be working on Good Friday. There are many places across the country where people have this day off. That's number one. Number two, don't forget, coming up next week, it is the beginning of your chance to win $5,000 on KIDO Talk Radio. We call it Win Kevin Miller's Cash. Of course, maybe we should throw in campaign cash since everybody's campaigning. But listen during the Kevin Miller Show and the Sean Hannity Show, and we'll give you, what you need to do. For more details, you can go to KIDOTalkRadio.com. But win Kevin Miller's Cash coming up only on KIDO Talk Radio. Very excited to be a part of that. And at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, some other issues that we do want to discuss. Obviously, the situation involving the FBI and Hillary Clinton. There's been some movement there. So we've got a lot to do. And don't be a stranger. But getting back to Good Friday, I'm amazed that so many people are working on Good Friday as opposed to taking the day off. Now, people will say, well, Kevin Miller, that's a separation of church and state. Well, tell that to the folks in Dearborn, Michigan that have the sounds from the horns going off like, from the mosques when it's time to pray. Why is there only separation of state? And this is my opinion. And this is what we love about this program. It's not a monologue program. It's your program and kind of mine. Why is it only separation of state, church and state, when it comes to Christians, right? Number one. And number two, I want to thank everybody in Meridian. Had a wonderful time at Ultra Touch Car Wash yesterday. Really appreciate those guys having us out. Our time is 6:17. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio.
The paper's founder, Eugenio Scalfari, an avowed atheist, wrote the story after a private meeting with Pope Francis at the Vatican earlier this week. In that meeting, the 93-year-old journalist claims he asked the Pope where bad souls go and where they are punished, to which the Pope allegedly replied, "Those who do not repent and cannot be forgiven disappear. A hell does not exist." That quote, breaking with 2,000 years of Catholic teachings, quickly spread around the world. But it's also not clear those were Pope Francis's exact words. Scalfari, who struck up a friendship with Francis, has previously admitted he doesn't take notes or make recordings of their conversations.
And there we have it. Kevin Miller in the morning here. We'll take your calls at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. From our friend Patrick Joseph Buchanan, Pope declares no hell. So ran the riveting headline on the Drudge Report of Holy Thursday. Drudge quoted the published exchange in La Repubblica between Pope Francis and his atheist friend. And he said, so what about bad souls? Why are they punished? Bad souls are not punished, Pope Francis is quoted as saying. Those who do not repent and cannot therefore be forgiven disappear. There is no hell. There is no disappearance of sinful souls. Now, again, I'm very, very comfortable with Patrick Joseph Buchanan. Certainly a Christian, a conservative, and a man who tells it like it is. So he writes, on the first Holy Thursday, Judas betrayed Christ. And of Judas the Lord said, woe to that man by whom the Son of Man shall be betrayed, if it were better for him that he not had been born. Did the soul of Judas and those of the monstrous evildoers of history just fade away? As General Douglas MacArthur said of old soldiers, if there is no hell, is not the greatest deterrent to the worst sins removed? What did Christ die on the cross to save us from? If Francis made such a statement, it would be rank heresy. And by the way, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, and Pat Buchanan will go on about this. I'll share it with you. If the Pope did say this and now he's trying to backtrack, the Pope's got to go. Why would you say that when we're talking about 2,000 years of doctrine? And back to Pat Buchanan's point, here we are on Good Friday, the day that Christ died for us, and you have the head of one of the most influential churches in the world. If they don't have the most money, they're right up there, disagreeing with Christian doctrine. Had the Pope been speaking ex cathedra as the vicar of Christ on earth, he would be contradicting 2,000 years of Catholic doctrine rooted in the teachings of Christ himself. He would be calling into question papal infallibility as defined in 1870 by the Vatican Council of Pius IX. Questions would arise as to whether Francis is a true pope. The Vatican swiftly issued a statement saying the Pope had a private conversation, not a formal interview, with his friend Scalafari. Yeah, but why would the Pope say this? The Vatican added, the textual words pronounced by the popes are not quoted. No quotation of the affirmation article must therefore be considered as a faithfully transcription of the words of the Holy Father. These guys really should figure out how to run the spin operation of either Trump or Obama. They're very good at spinning this. Pat Buchanan adds, sorry, this will not do. This does not answer the question the Pope raised in his chat. Does hell exist? Are souls that die in mortal sin damned to hell for all eternity? Does the Pope accept this belief? Is this still the infallible teachings of the Roman Catholic Church? However, one may applaud Francis' stance on social justice. On matters of faith and morals, he has called defined doctrine into question and created confusion throughout the church he heads. And again, this isn't the Catholic Hour, but you don't have to be a Catholic to wonder what's going on under Francis. Many conservatives have feared Francis's reign as one of the most liberal progressive in the modern era, undoing the conservative teachings of John Paul II. Think about this at 580-5436-580-KIDO, that you have this noted statesman saying this. In a letter, Amoris Laetitia, the joy of love, the Pope seemed to give approval to the receiving of Holy Communion by divorced and remarried Catholics whose previous marriages had not been annulled and whom the Church holds to be living in adultery. Relying on the Pope's letter, German bishops have begun to authorize the distribution of communion to divorced and remarried couples. And it goes on and on. So that's one thought at 580-5436-580-KIDO. Coming up next, the legislative session. Many people have gone to the newspaper, or the newspapers have gone to them, these legislators, and saying it was a tough, brutal session that left them emotionally drained. Really? How about working for a living? More on that in a minute. Our time is 6. All right, Larry, thank you very much. So we have the legislative session done officially. We want to thank Senator Nonini for joining us there, Nonini for Idaho for joining us yesterday, giving his thoughts on the session. I go back to it, and, you know, you have people talking to Channel 7, you have people talking to the newspaper, and essentially saying that they were emotionally drained because some of the bills that they wanted discussed never went anywhere. You have our great friend, conservative Brett Crane, talking about sex trafficking bills that didn't go anywhere to try and stop the selling of people. And we're not talking about in Malaysia. We're talking about here in Idaho, which, again, I think that human trafficking is already against the law. It's nothing really to laugh about, with all due respect. It is nothing to laugh about. But when you have Brett Crane, the House Assistant Majority Leader, that's pretty high up there, right? Saying, he couldn't get things done. That's an issue. He tells Channel 7, quote, "It was a battle. I told my wife I feel like I've aged this year." And from the report here, Crane's Waterloo came early in the season when his efforts to combat human sex trafficking died in committee. The bill targeted those who finance such activity by making it a first-time felony to solicit prostitutes. Several young women who escaped from trafficking rings testified in favor of the legislation during a February 1st hearing. Now, hold that thought for a minute. Okay, so here we have folks coming to the legislature saying, look, I was sex trafficked. I was a victim. And in Idaho, to quote soon-to-be former Governor Otter, we're the reddest of the red. We're talking about, felonies for buying prostitutes. And you have somebody saying, on an average day, I'd see 5 Johns, said one girl, who went by the initials BD. I was being raped multiple times every day. The Johns are just as dangerous as the traffickers, please make sure they pay for buying me. I don't know about this. Committee members generally favored the measure, but questioned why prosecutors don't use existing statutes to charge buyers with misdemeanors. They declined to advance the bill until more information was available. And here you have Brent Crane very choked up about it. Quote, I've lost more sleep over that particular issue than any other issue I've worked on combined. I respect the committee process, but to me, this is modern-day slavery. When you understand what these young people are going through, what it took for them to come to this body asking for help, when you don't succeed, it's hard. This is a weight I'm going to carry until I get to do something. In other words, he's able to get something done. And then it goes on, and we're talking about other folks, passion projects and such. Well, I don't know what to tell you. You have Christy Perry's measure that would give judges some limited discretion in reducing mandatory minimum sentences for illegal drug users. You know, they go back and forth on this thing. Well, then I don't know what to tell you. Why? It seems to me that a lot of people are frustrated with leadership in the House and the Senate. Maybe they're not saying that, but that's really what it comes down to. If human trafficking in the state of Idaho is a problem, then we should address it, right? Just like repealing the grocery tax, right? More on that in a minute. You're listening to Kevin Miller. Our time is 6:31 on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Doug. And coming up, do you agree with the governor that this legislative session was successful? But first, we go live to London. Our great friend Simon Owen joining us to talk about, something spooky that could be happening this weekend. A Chinese space lab the size of a bus is falling back to Earth. Where is it going to land? Simon, good morning.
Morning, Kevin.
You know what everybody says, not in my neighborhood.
Well, you never know. I mean, not in my neighborhood, because I'm talking to you from London, and Britain and Northern Europe are outside of the area where this might happen. But the United States, I'm afraid to say, is not out of the area. I've got a map here from the European Space Agency, which is coordinating efforts to track this space laboratory as it hurtles through space and back towards the Earth's atmosphere. There's a shaded area on this map showing where they think this will re-enter the atmosphere, and that shaded area covers about half the planet. And they say they can't be any more accurate than that until about an hour before re-entry happens, simply because this thing is moving so fast. So much of Europe, Russia, Canada are outside the zone, but the US, South America, Australasia, South Asia, all of Africa, very much a potential landing spot.
Indeed. Even people have said it might land here in Idaho.
Well, I mean, I think no one really knows, and that's the situation. Although, to be honest, even if we did know, experts are pretty much lining up to say don't be too concerned about this, because firstly, most of this will burn up as it re-enters the Earth's atmosphere, and space junk comes back to Earth all the time, and it just burns up and no one notices. The difference here, though, is that this is larger than most space junk. It's about the size of a bus, 34 feet long. It weighs 8.5 tons. It's also, as far as we can tell, out of control. It was China's first space laboratory, and the Chinese haven't said a great deal about what's going on, but Western experts seem pretty convinced that it is broken, essentially, and so plans for a controlled re-entry have been abandoned, hence all this speculation. All they know is that it's going to career back into the Earth's atmosphere sometime on Saturday or Sunday, somewhere in this area that covers, as I say, about half the planet.
Well, Simon, again, hopefully it will just dissipate. Have any of the experts said that we're going to see more and more of these as these satellites continue to age and fall back to Earth?
Well, I mean, this is a space station, so this is a modern bit of equipment. It was only launched into orbit in 2011, so this is pretty new. And a satellite, comparatively, is very small normally, I think. And so this is an unusually large object, as I say. And it is something that, China's big on space these days. The president wants it to be a great space exploring country, and perhaps that's why they haven't said much about the fact that it seems to have gone awry. There's an expert out there who tracks items that fall back to Earth and their size, and he says that in the all-time list, this is number 50 in terms of size. So by a certain stretch, it's not the largest. And also the European Space Agency has told us that in the last 60 years, it says there have been nearly 6,000 uncontrolled re-entries of large objects, and none of them have harmed anyone. So the odds are very small, but you never know. There is a chance that if you're out for a walk this weekend, you might stumble across something that looks a little bit unusual, maybe has Chinese writing on it. You might be about to encounter a very unusual object from another part of the world.
Simon Owen, you have a great day. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right, Simon Owen joining us live from London. Remember, here with Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. We proudly are associated with Fox News. We're a Fox News affiliate here, and it's great to be able to talk to these folks, whether it's Simon in London or our friends in Washington or New York or where a big story breaks. We take you there across the country. Let's go to Hank, and Hank, let me warm you up with this one. The governor says his last session was successful, possibly the best ever. Now, he didn't say the best ever, but he did say this session was successful. You're a fan of Governor Otter. What do you think?
Barf. He basically means that Butch got what he wanted, and the leadership was the best that money could buy. I mean, he spent a lot of ACCI fund and other political funds to get this leadership, this wonderful leadership that we have in the legislature. Crane's mistake was he should have checked. He should have kissed the governor's ring first and got his blessing for his bill. Nothing gets through without the governor's blessing. And I'm surprised that a man who's in leadership who would be so naive to think that he could do anything independently of the governor. That's a lesson he needs to learn. You have to follow the governor's dictates or what the governor's wishes. And if he doesn't consider it important, it's not going to go anywhere. The governor runs this legislature. Everybody balls and scrapes and genuflects. I mean, that was why the spending in the primaries was all about. In 4 election cycles was to get this subservient legislature, and he's got it. So I'm surprised that somebody who's in leadership doesn't know the facts of life, or he's not exactly being square with the public. I find it unbelievable that he's that naive.
Well, let's continue on here, but it's over now. The governor's reign is pretty much done.
Well, it won't be if Brad gets it. It's pretty much going to be the same Boise Swamp. I mean, it's not a. Brad's a nice guy in a lot of ways, but I think that he follows orders, and he's sort of like Oscar K. Allen was to Huey Long.
But won't he be given the orders then?
Well, the thing is that I think that he will be dictated largely by what Swamp wants him to do, starting with Sullivan or Rehberger and the other bagmen that are up there in the legislature. So I mean, I think that he's going to have to. I think we need somebody who's more independent. I'm distrustful of, for instance, of Alred, or not Alred, but the gentleman who's claiming to run the Mormon State president right at the moment. I'm kind of having a memory block.
Steve Pankey?
Not Pankey, but at any rate, the thing is that I think the only person in there that has enough sufficient independence in this situation and can win is Labrador. And until you can get the governor's office cleaned up, you're not going to get change in the legislature.
All right. Hank, once again, giving us his daily take on Governor Otter.
Yeah, we've got about 200. I think we've got about probably 270 more, roughly speaking, days of this thing where we can clean the manure out of the governor's office. But I mean, steam clean it and probably put 25,000 gallons of Lysol, get the smell out of it. But it's going to take that long before we can start.
Now, Hank, you take care.
Okay.
All right. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Kevin Miller in the morning here. Taking your calls on this Good Friday. If you'd like to talk about your faith, if you'd like to talk about, what the Pope said, And it's funny that now they're saying it wasn't an official statement from the Pope. But, as we're sharing that article from Pat Buchanan, look, Christianity has taught there is a hell. And when you have a leader saying that there's no hell, there's some issues, right? Because as Pat Buchanan said, and we'll echo those comments, what did Jesus die for? What did Jesus die for, if not to free us from sin? And when you have this leader saying this, and again, many people believe that our Catholic are not down with this Pope. They believe that he's been brought in by the libs to destroy the church. Now, when it comes to feeding the poor, when it comes to helping people, Francis is right there at the tops, although he does embrace the social justice, which, again, we can talk about coming up. But before that, at 580-5436, 580-KIDO, let me remind you, coming up next week, your chance to win Kevin Miller's cash on KIDO Talk Radio. Listen to the Kevin Miller program, your chance to win up to $5,000. That's right, up to $5,000. Listen for me in the mornings and Sean Hannity in the afternoons. We'll tell you what you need to do. And, of course, more details at KIDOTalkRadio.com. Coming up next, though, back to the legislative season. Are you happy that it's over? Bob Nonini had a good comment yesterday, the senator, saying we need to get in and out. But where were the people pushing for the grocery tax? Have we determined that really the legislature doesn't run the state of Idaho, but in fact you have leadership and the soon-to-be outgoing Governor Otter, running it? Is that how it's playing out? When you have people saying, I had bills against sex trafficking, and I couldn't get them through committee. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And Kevin Miller in the morning, taking more of your phone calls about the legislature and the Pope on Good Friday. Ouch. Hello, Max. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio, calling in from Garden City.
Good morning, Kevin. It's going to be a beautiful day. I'm calling to... Kevin, I'm disappointed. It seems like you are doing everything you can to plant the seeds of doubt in people's minds on a he said, she said thing with the Pope. We don't know if he did or he didn't. This extremely old interviewer, this somebody who may well have an axe to grind, may not have an axe to grind. I have enough problems with this Jesuit Pope already. Why don't you move on to something a little more important than just repeating the same lines that do nothing but sow seeds of doubt in people's minds?
Yeah, I take issue with your clarification. I think I've pointed this out objectively, giving the Vatican side of the story. And
I challenge you to listen.
Can I
hold
on? Can I finish?
Yes, you may.
I'd appreciate that.
Go ahead.
A little courtesy here at KIDO. Yeah, well, continue on, please, because obviously you don't want to hear what I have to say.
I said, go ahead. Go.
Okay. Well, would you please be quiet then?
Mm-hmm.
Back to what I'm saying. No, I totally disagree with you. The idea that the Vatican is backing up, saying it wasn't an official interview. Look, this Pope is one of the most progressive liberal popes around. You talk to people in and out of the church, they don't know what this guy's up to. The idea that he became Pope, getting rid of Benedict, one of the most conservative hand-chosen successors of John Paul II, is troubling. That he's into social justice, that he's making these statements, it fits a pattern with him. Where's his denial? Where's his denial that said he didn't do it? That the Vatican said, Max, the Vatican said that it wasn't, paraphrasing, it wasn't an official interview. I think that's troubling. And if there is no hell, why did Christ die? I think the Pope's got some explaining to do, with all due respect.
I agree. This Pope has a lot of explaining in a lot of areas. He's a Jesuit pro-communist Pope. When this guy came to the papacy, just his appointment shook a lot of us, shook a lot of Catholics around the world. But what I'm saying is, be he flawed or be he not, I think that until we can get past the he said, she said nature of the story, we probably need to move on. You could have 2 hours a day on the air and elicit the proven, viable faults, foibles, and stupidities of this. So he's a Jesuit. They're socialists. What can I say? Since the 70s, the Jesuit order went that way. They're the only ones that are welcomed into communist China. That should be a flag right there.
I'm just waiting for you to stop. Fair enough.
I'm stopped.
Now, we did move on, though. We were talking about the legislature.
Oh, yes.
Was it a successful run, considering that we still tax people for groceries?
I agree completely. As long as they fail to address that grocery tax head on, it's a failed legislature. It's failed humanity.
Max, finally, Amazon.com, the name of your two books.
Oh, thank you. Paper Dragon
Yes.
and Eyes on China. If you look them up on the computer, type Paper Dragon Max Allen. Otherwise, you're going to get little folding puzzles how to make paper dragons.
Fair enough, Max. You have a happy Easter, sir.
You have a very happy Easter and have a Good Friday.
Fair enough. Our great friend Max, appreciate him calling, and that's what makes it the magic here. We don't all have to agree. It's not agreement radio, but it is KIDO Talk Radio with Kevin Miller. Time for Trevor. And I'm Kevin Miller. Coming up next week, your chance to win Kevin Miller's campaign cash. Well, really, Kevin Miller's cash on KIDO Talk Radio. For more details, go to KIDOTalkRadio.com to find the dates and times. Of course, I'll give you a little secret. We always want to take care of the people that take care of us by listening to us here in the morning. And basically what you're going to do is listen during the Kevin Miller Show and the Sean Hannity Show. And your chance to win, get this, up to $5,000. That's right, up to $5,000 on KIDO Talk Radio. Details at KIDOTalkRadio.com. And we certainly look forward to that. Coming up, though, we'll talk a little bit about national security and then getting back to the legislature. I know you're going, Kevin, the legislature. What bills would you have liked to have seen passed? For me, I still think that it can't be called a successful session without an attempt to repeal that repressive, onerous grocery tax. What do you think? That's next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.